And so these were just all compounding physical issues. And then imagine when we think about the challenges that our youth have today in body image, and that's both male and female, but let's just focus on female. And you have a young girl going through her adolescence, going into her teen years, where body image, and especially today with all the social platforms around, all these young girls her age that are posting videos around dancing and fitness, and all of her siblings were all very strong competitive athletes, and Faith tried. She tried so hard, but she couldn't run well. So all these things were going on around life that she was trying to live, but yet emotionally, she was being told all the time she couldn't do it because her body couldn't do it. Her will wanted to, highly intelligent, but her body could not keep up. So then as we were trying to treat all these different issues, she would go to different providers. And I remember one specifically when Faith was talking about the pain she had at night and needing assistance in sleeping because she wasn't sleeping. And he truly just diminished her and said, well, you're probably just spending too much time on your phone. Here's a book to read. And a book to read around sleep cleansing and how to prepare for bed and all this. Meanwhile, she's writhing in pain at night. And I mean, there's multiple situations where Faith would go to providers, and even with what ended up taking her from us is heart failure. And yet just a year before, we had met with cardiologists and they were completely saying, oh, you're fine. The lightheadedness, you're fine. The queasy feelings, the out of balance, you're okay. And continue to be basically put off. And she would do her part to try to do good self-care. She was extremely healthy on her eating. She would try to work out. And yet when she would go to different providers to get help, quite often she was literally dismissed as it not being real. It's in her head, it's psychological, which there probably at some point began to become some of that as well. But it wasn't the core, it wasn't the root. And what we struggled with, both her mom and I and Faith, was to get people to actually invest the time to go through the symptoms to get to the root causes of what was actually triggering some of her symptoms and her problems. And we just felt like so often we would get no call back from people for weeks and months, and sometimes they just wouldn't even call back. Or we would get passed from provider to provider. Oh, well, it's not really us. You probably should go over here. Another 3 months waiting to get in. And this happened repetitively to the point where she, especially as she became 16, 17, we started seeing more of that teen spirit come out of, basically F them. They don't even believe me. She was getting more and more angry because people did not listen and would not care. And people would say, the first thing people would always say with her, you're so complicated. And that would immediately make her feel like, here I am a problem again. It made her mad. It made her mom and I mad because she wasn't complicated. She was Faith. And her spirit was such that how can you dismiss this person who has actually been through so much more than most people will ever face in their life, and she's still smiling, she's still trying, she's trying to live a normal life, and then you diminish her immediately as soon as she walks in the door. It was just so angering to see and experience. And you have to find this balance as her advocate, that you need to continue to advocate and escalate it in a way that you get the right attention without alienating the providers, and then you're just passed along and ignored.
When I hear Juris talk about being Faith's advocate, her dad and her advocate, I've heard stories like this before, where people in my role have questioned and doubted and said stuff like, well, you shouldn't be in this much pain, with the sort of unspoken end of the sentence being, thus you are not, as opposed to, I just don't understand. And because it's a hard thing for physicians to say. And I think that's one thing that we do in palliative care. We recognize that pain is what a patient says it is in the way they say it is. And also we talk a lot in palliative care about total pain, that it's not just nerve endings in a physical part of your body. It's what your life is doing and what your soul is doing. And it just felt to me like Faith was getting hit from every single side. She was dealing with cancer. She was dealing with growing up in a culture that had expectations and fighting valiantly to achieve so many things despite all the obstacles she was facing. And then to go to people who were expected and should be supportive of her and should seek to understand her and should seek to help her, and then questioning the legitimacy of what her experience was, both with regard to cancer and pain and in other areas as well. That was a time where people should have rallied around her, as opposed to giving her more things to overcome when we should be taking down the obstacles, not building them up. That infuriated me. And it wasn't because people, weren't trying. I don't mean to cast aspersions. I just think that we, as physicians, sometimes if we can't explain something, it's hard for us to say, I don't understand, as opposed to, it's more tempting to say, well, that must not be the case because there's no explanation for